Welcome back to our show. I'm Alexa, your netball bestie, and together with Jenna, this is Your Netball Besties. This is where we deep dive into the SSN game analysis and what the netball world is currently talking about. Round 13 is done and dusted. Fever have secured their minor premier position with a record-breaking 11 wins in a row. They are undeniably the most consistent team in the competition this year, and based on current form, the next four teams on the ladder, so Swifts, Vixens, T-Birds, and Lightning, seem like they are only in competition with each other at this point. They all have a lot of work to do if they want any chance of defeating Fever at the moment. We had a very near upset between Vixens and Firebirds this week, as well as some controversy on the game-winning super shot by Lightning against Swifts. Don't forget to hit that follow button and please leave us a 5-star rating if you enjoy this episode. A huge thank you to everyone who already has done so. We really, really do appreciate it. I know that it can be a little bit annoying and inconvenient, but we genuinely appreciate every single 5-star rating, every like, every comment, every time you recommend us to your netball besties. All right, Jenna, can you break down the games and the scores for us?
So on Saturday, we saw the Lightning with the upset of the round take the win over the Swifts 71-70. Then we saw the T-Birds versus the Mavericks with the T-Birds getting the win 60-49. Then on Sunday, we had the Vixens versus Queensland Firebirds, which were very close to almost another upset, but the Vixens got away with it 64-62. And then, of course, the Fever in another dominant performance, 73-56 over the Giants.
So we're actually going to do things a little bit differently this episode. We're going to talk about the headlines first before jumping into the game analysis, mainly because there is one in particular that is really kind of, taking over the internet at the moment, and I want to give my opinion on it. So if you watched the Lightning versus Swifts game, then you would have seen the game-winning super shot by Steph Fretwell in the final seconds of that game. It was honestly an incredible moment. It was one of those games that was extremely, extremely stressful, but also exhilarating to watch. Definitely one of the best games of the season, I would say. But let's talk about the controversy around the super shot that Steph Fretwell took in those final seconds. So I've been asked a few times on my TikTok, and I have seen a few comments on the Netball Talk where you're an admin, Jenna, and that's actually when it first came to my attention because I didn't really notice anything in the moment. I was way too emotionally involved and way too happy about the result. If you have listened to our podcast for, at all, then you would know that I am a huge Steph Fretwell fan. I'm a Lightning fan as well as a Fever fan. So 100% you would be fair to assume that I would have a very biased view on this situation. And I kind of do, but then I also don't. I feel like my opinion on this situation is going to surprise and annoy some people. So first of all, let's talk about the fact of where Steph's landing feet were when she essentially grabbed the ball after the block from Clow. So she did land, in my opinion, her tippy toes of her left foot did land on the line. And on the line, in my opinion, is in the super shot area. It's in the 2-point zone. We actually can go back and watch a multitude of super shots since its inception, and we can see a lot of shooters standing on the edge of that circle with their toes over the line, or on the line. Their toes are physically on the line, and that has counted no issues. So I do think that when they talked about this in Pivot, there was a few elements that actually I found frustrating because I didn't agree. So they played the angle of the shot, which was behind Steph, so you could not actually physically see where the whole foot landed. It was kind of one of those optical illusions. If you actually watch the other footage, which shows the front, it actually shows her very clearly tippy toes only landing on the line. At no point does her foot actually land clearly at all in the 1 point area. Having said that, I watched this again and again and again. And in my opinion, Steph Fretwell does actually make a footwork error in this moment. If you watch her left and right foot, she lands on the two, and she essentially makes her left foot her landing foot by lifting her right foot. But then with that left foot, she pivots from heel and then to toe. And then she steps back on the right foot. Had she just made that right foot the landing foot and taken her shot from there in the first place, which is where she ended up taking the shot anyway, then that would have been fine. But because that landing foot became the grounded foot became the left foot, and then she did technically pivot from toe, heel, toe, in my opinion, that actually should have been a footwork call and a no goal, not a 1 point. So, and it pains me to say this as a Lightning fan and as probably Steph Fretwell's #1 fan. It pains me to say that, but when I'm giving opinions on the games and the controversies, I like to think that I can put facts over feelings in these situations, and that is just how I saw it. What do you think, Jenna?
Yeah, I definitely think it's something that's gotten people talking, hasn't it? I was just lucky I didn't have any skin in this game. So I think maybe I would be more passionate if it were Fever, for example. I've rewatched it as well, slow mode it and everything. And yeah, the tip of the toes on the line definitely were the first point of contact. Because I remember watching it in the moment going, oh, that looks a bit like an interesting movement. And then she got it and then they won. And then I was like, oh my God, they actually beat him. But this also begs the question, should we bring in more like recordings like in the middle of the game? Should they be able to review like we see in rugby and other sports?
And that is definitely what Dylan Nexthip was talking about on Pivot as well. They were definitely talking more about the landing position as opposed to the footwork movement. But it's very interesting because yes, 100% we should be having that technology exists. So why don't we have it? Other sports have it. That seems like a very black and white situation. Yes, it will slow down the game, but who cares? Who cares? Who cares if it slows down the game by a couple of minutes? We have multiple timeouts. We have injury timeouts. We had a mic being pulled from the post, in one of the games this week, and that was like 5 minutes of waiting for that to be fixed. We have people coming on to sweep the court. We have to wait for that time. So all of these reasons that delay the game and hold time, surely priority wise, this should be at the top of the list.
From the team's point of view, though, you'd think if you were able to wait like a couple minutes and then get a definitive answer, would you not prefer that?
Oh, 100%. I don't think any team would want to win in controversy and then be told they didn't deserve that win. And then no team would want to then feel robbed of a win based on an incorrect call that could have been, and this is across the board, and we've seen this happen time and time again. And at this point in the competition, this shit matters. Like, this shit matters.
We are so emotionally invested in the teams that we go for that it's very easy / hard to accept a loss in that moment, but then easy to go, oh, well, it was that one exact moment that lost us the game. I think at the end of the day, there were so many opportunities that Swifts could have got ahead, and there were other things that could have been done. And something that was so unswifts, like to me, it just seemed like just not how their normal thought process was. You have possession of the ball, you're up by 1 goal, there's 30 seconds on the clock. You play it around, you run the clock down. But for them to go for the one, knowing Lightning had the next center pass, I think that was it just seemed like a very, I don't know, it just does not seem like something that they would have done.
I think the end of that game is going to be something both teams are going to be analysing very deeply and essentially breaking down what the other options were they could have done in those moments, what other choices they could have made, et cetera, et cetera. It will definitely be a learning experience. Let's jump straight into the first game of round 13, which was this game with all the controversy, and that was the Lightning versus Swifts. So we started out with the unfortunate news that Bruce was going to be out due to a leg injury. We saw her on crutches. It does not look great. this is very heartbreaking given how hard she's worked to, come back into her form after being riddled with injuries. So honestly, it's quite heartbreaking. I think they mentioned on Pivot that it's a soft tissue injury, which is apparently quite bad. I don't know anything about injuries, but they mentioned that it can be quite serious. So just, huge sympathies to Courtney Bruce because we're huge fans of her and honestly, just heartbroken for her. We started this game with, in my opinion, a lot of nervous energy and errors from both sides. So even though the Swifts actually did take a lead very early on, there was like a 1 to 6 goals in the first couple of minutes, which was crazy. But having said that, they were still losing the ball multiple times in those 4 minutes. They were just able to still get the ball through the goal, whereas the Lightning weren't able to. But both sides were essentially, yeah, it wasn't their best 4 minutes. Very excitingly, we saw that Kara was back in the lineup for the Lightning. We had the Steph Kara combo back in full force and with not putting any doubts in anyone's mind, proving that that connection is absolutely elite and that Kara is just an exceptionally fantastic goal shooter. Her movement in the circle is something that I think is unmatched. The connection she has with Steph, the way that they just know exactly where they need to be and when they need to be there, the space that Kara is able to create, the screens and the set plays that we see just delivered so beautifully. It works so well and seamlessly, and that is definitely what they are missing when Rue is on the court. Rue is obviously quite new, and although she's been in this competition for a while now, we do see that there is that strong connection and that Steph does require to work a lot harder because of, that connection and I guess almost like the telepathy isn't there. I really loved seeing Hadley and Simmons in the first half of this game. I thought their feeds and quick releases and their footwork and work around the circle edge to get that ball to the shooters was actually quite beautiful. It was seamless, it was quick. The defenders didn't have a chance to get any idea to get a hand in. It just worked really, really well. When we saw Hadley taken off and benched for what was later revealed to be managed minutes for her, this was definitely an opportunity that Lightning capitalized on because Paige Hadley is without a doubt their most consistent and strongest mid-court player at the moment. And having her off the court, they really, really felt that loss. We saw multiple underpost misses from Grace. You could see that she was under a lot of pressure, not just mentally and the fact that, Swifts have not been having their best results over the last few games, but also just credit to Irvin. Even though we didn't see a number of spectacular intercepts from Irvin, what she was doing is really creating that doubt and pressure. And we saw that in just Grace's misses under the post and some fumbles under the post as well. One of my favorite matchups, which I've spoken about before, is Steph and Turner. In the past, historically, in my opinion, Turner wins that battle against Steph almost every time. She just knows exactly how to shut her down. Whereas in this game, for the first time in a long time, I actually think that Steph won this battle. She was able to control the play in that shooting end. She was able to come out and find space. She wasn't being blocked and obstructed so much in the way that we normally see Turner able to do. So actually huge kudos to Steph. She had one of her best games specifically against Maddie Turner. Jenna, what are your thoughts so far on the first half of that game?
Yeah, I definitely think you could definitely see some just really silly mistakes from both sides. It was a bit of a sloppy game for sure to start. We saw, like as you said, we saw Grace missing a lot under the post. We saw Steph with some early missed super shots too. I did like the Ash and the Grace combo. I did think that Ash was giving Grace a bit too much room. I think Grace is one of those players where she's not quite a fan of the one-on-one, and that's something that Courtney Bruce does really well. And even the mind game. But going back to the last game that Swifts and Lightning played, even Grace admitted that Irvin got in her head, and I'm sure Irvin took that in her stride in this game. You could definitely tell it was still playing on her mind. I'm sure she probably wasn't, she might have been a little relieved to see Courtney Bruce being left out. So,
I bet,
but
yeah.
yeah, yeah. One thing that we have been noticing the past few weeks as well is constantly passing off again. Noticed that Steph was passing off a lot to Kara being in the option, even if she was in position, which is that passing around always stresses me out a bit when Lightning start to pass around more than they need in that circle. But it was good to see Verity. I felt Verity had a strong game. We've not been able to see her playing for a little bit now, and she did really well coming on.
In regards to the passing around in the circle, I know that this has been something that we've spoken about a lot, especially in the most recent rounds where Kara hasn't been on the court. In my opinion, when I have seen these two play together, Steph has always passed off to Kara. Steph has always passed off a lot more than she actually takes the shot. The only reason that it was, I guess, so highlighted recently is because of the disconnect between Steph and Rue and the entire attacking end, and because we saw Rue needing to pass out just as much as Steph, and then they didn't have any other option for to pass to, which is what Kara is. So Kara does not pass out. Kara is the go-to shooter for Lightning, and Steph has always played a backup shooting role to Kara, and that is what works so beautifully. She is in the circle, but she has always looked to feed to Kara first, unless she has to take the shot, unless she is in the 2-point zone, or if, Kara genuinely doesn't look like she can get out of it. But credit to Kara, in most cases, that girl has a magical ability to come out and be an option nearly every time. She is extremely hard to shut down for defenders. There were moments where, in like a 3 to 4 second moment, where I saw Kara re-offer 3 times. She was so quick to recognize when her option that she created was going to be blocked by a defender in that half-a-second movement, to then, instead of just being like, oh, I've been blocked, you could see her instantly, okay, well, now I'm going to offer on the other end of the baseline, or now I'm going to pop forward, or now I'm going to screen. She is so smart and quick in her choices and her movements. She is always thinking, how can I be an option to Steph or to the circle edge feeders? That is 100% what Lightning has been missing before, is just having that player who is always making herself that option. I think it's pretty easy to see who's going to be my MVP of the round today. I also really liked the beautiful screen that she did. So this is something that we've spoken about before in regards to some of the shorter shooters when they're taking that super shot, and having a defender that has an incredibly strong lean and putting that doubt in them, and how rare it was to actually see the other shooter in the circle create a screen, so there was a bit more security for the shooter to actually take the shot. There was a moment here where I saw Kara do it so beautifully, where she was using her body to screen the defender, but she was also on an angle to be able to spin immediately and be also the first person to the rebound if necessary. So she was literally having a dual role in that work, in that footwork that she was positioning for. Very smart play. Definitely something that we should be seeing a lot more of as well, as opposed to just someone being under the post. And then, of course, we saw the game finish how it did. There were definitely interesting choices by the Swifts attack end, like you said, Jenna, in how they chose to handle those final few seconds. And then we saw Lightning make a very clear and brave decision. They actually had clearly set in their mind that they were going to go for that too. They could have gone for the one and forced extra time, which probably would have been, in hindsight, the safer, better option, and give yourself that extra 5 minutes to get ahead, especially as the momentum, was fairly even. They would have had a good chance. But the risk was very much taken, because that super shot setup wasn't just once. That was about 3 or 4 times that they kept repositioning for that super shot option, that they had clearly made a decision that was the risk they were going to take. That was their game-making decision. Go hard or go home, basically, was the attitude they had. Second game of the day, we had the Mavs versus T-Birds. So we had a couple of changes in the lineup. Grenvold out, as she was the replacement player, even after having a quite spectacular performance in round 12. This was definitely a surprise. It was, of course, to make room for contracted player Lauren Parkinson. This was actually a really beautiful moment seeing her finally come out on court during this game. It's like I messaged you, Jenna. I think we hadn't realized just how long she's been out because we were at the Sydney Teen Girls Cup and we saw this injury happen in like the first couple of minutes of her first game. It was heartbreaking to see. So it's been like a season and almost 2 seasons. Like we're at the end of
Yeah,
this season. So nearly 2 years since she's been back on an SSN court. That is a very long recovery.
definitely. Yeah, because I think they mentioned that she did the initial ACL and then that healed, and then she had some soft tissue injuries, which prolonged her a bit longer. But yeah, I mean, it's great to see her back out there. Injuries is something that nobody wants to ever have to deal with. So it's really good to see that, she's persevered and she's back.
In the first couple of minutes of this game, we had Georgie off in tears, what looked like a hand injury. She looked visibly upset. This happened very early on, and there were a lot of question marks around what actually happened. We saw her with ice on her hand, and then shortly after, relief to everybody, we saw her standing up and warming up, ready to come back on court. Huge highlight of this game, I think, for everyone is Latanya Wilson. We saw her make her presence known extremely early in this game with just very early on clean intercept after clean intercept, deflection after deflection. And just when you think that the Mavs will adjust in order to work around what Latanya Wilson was able to do, it was like they just kept repeating the exact same mistakes, and it was just child's play for her at this point. It looked like she was just in her element, and at some points they were just, I don't know, making it so easy for her. In the first quarter, we had the T-Birds actually get 5 in a row, and that forced the Mavs into a timeout. In the second quarter, the Mavs continued with those mistakes in regards to just those long cross-court passes into Jock, which Latanya Wilson was just able to read so easily, and just her speed is just insane. At what point do you just think, get to the circle edge, just try and get to the circle edge, stop those insanely long cross-court passes? In the second quarter, we had Pallavi make an appearance with Sasha going to the bench, but this really only lasted about 5 minutes before the swap was made back and Sasha was back on the court as the T-Birds took a 10-goal lead. The T-Birds' defensive pressure all down the court was an absolute highlight for me. You could just see the Mavs being stifled all the way down in every third, just trying to get in. If anything, that is exactly, it was that pressure which was forcing those desperate long passes into Jock, was because of the amount of work that it was taking them to even just get to the transverse line to try and get down to the attacking end. And then there was no one there was no options, and they just, it was a Hail Mary pass every time. We went into halftime with a 14-goal lead to the Thunderbirds. Jenna, what were your thoughts on the first half?
I felt a little bit disappointed for Mavs because I feel like we've seen such a strong side from them the past few weeks. Their inability to not adjust and work it short and sharp and get it to the circle edge, like you said. I just think after the first, okay, long bomb intercepted by Laddie, okay, sure, all right, maybe we'll try to get a second time. But by the third time, this isn't clearly working. I would have also liked to seen Pallavi come on a bit sooner and stay on. I don't think Glasgow had her best game. She actually finished the game on -9 net points, which by the end of the second quarter, Latanya Wilson herself was on 79 net points, which was more than the entire Mavs team net points of 71.5 combined.
It'll be very interesting when we have Eleanor Cardwell back in that lineup to see how they actually split those minutes on the court, because I would say that we're definitely not going to see Jock go anywhere. I would say they will keep Jock consistently in that position because she hasn't really done anything wrong, whereas it is that goal attack position that seems to be a little bit temperamental. So I would imagine that we're going to see a lot of movement in that position going forward for next season. In the third quarter, we had Fru off and Kayla on. There was a little bit of a bib swap between Kayla and Georgie in the second half as well. I'm actually not sure why Fru was taken off. She was actually doing quite well. I was confused as to why she was taken off. If I did have a look at champion data to see what the net points were between Kayla and Fru, and Kayla did have, I think, about 12 more than Fru, but you also have to take into account that Kayla also spent some time in the wing attack bib during this game, during her time on the court, and that also affects that. You rack up points with every feed and assist. We saw that weird mic tech issue on the goalpost. I didn't even know they had mics on the post. Like,
I didn't know, but it makes sense because sometimes the shots are so loud.
thought that was weird because I was like, do they have them there? Is that why we can hear the umpires' voices when they're on the baseline? But I actually assumed that the umpires had mics on. I didn't realize that the mics were on the posts.
Yeah, I'm not too sure exactly. Yeah.
We actually saw the Mavs win that third quarter by 3 goals, despite Latanya having a field day with her intercepts and deflections. The Mavs actually stepped up in this quarter, but it just wasn't enough. The T-Birds were still ahead with a solid lead going into the fourth quarter. I think that Fru's absence was felt in this situation. In the fourth quarter, the T-Birds sealed the deal with an 11-goal win. I also wanted to highlight a few of the stats from this game because it was very interesting, one of which that you touched on in regards to Glasgow. But the Mavs actually had 3 of their players finish with negative net points. That is not the best performance. And on a positive note, Latanya Wilson finished with 12 gains, 9 intercepts, and 9 deflections. What an outstanding performance by her. Right, Sunday's games. Game 3 was the Vixens versus Firebirds. I personally have not watched this game yet. Jenna has. A few points I want to mention is that I was shocked when someone told me what the score was, even in the last final 5 minutes, because I was obviously driving down to the Fever game where we went, Jenna. So I didn't watch this game as I was getting ready. And I was shocked that it was so close. Not in a million years, given the form that Vixens have been putting out and given the form that Firebirds have been given out with what now is that 10 or 11 consecutive losses for Firebirds?
11.
11 consecutive losses for Firebirds. And they only lost that game by 2 goals. That is crazy. So I'm going to pass over to you, Jenna, to explain what the hell happened in this game.
For Vixens taking out a lead early on with Firebirds not playing as consistently in their attack end again. In the second quarter, we saw Firebirds shake a bit of the nerves off and we saw a bit of a better performance from them. They started to really win some good ball in defense. Big thanks to the effort of Ruby Bakewell-Doran and finally a little bit of their attack end converting some of those gains, but still losing quite a lot of ball. Something that we've been talking about for weeks now was they were struggling again to get the ball to Mary. No one was being an option. Mary was feeling pressure to come out again. No one willing to get to circle edge. And that's just something that I feel like has been a consistent issue for Firebirds this season. The third quarter, we saw the Vixens' shooting accuracy start dropping. We saw the defensive pressure starting to get to them a little bit. The Firebirds were really good on the rebound, and finally the attack end was starting to reward by converting that gain ball. Fourth quarter, we sort of continued with a very tight contest, which I don't think anyone would have really pegged. In the last few minutes, we saw Moore and Abby in a moving circle to attack those super shots. We saw 3 super shots sunk in a row in the last couple of minutes. Very similar to the Swifts game versus Lightning, we saw the Vixens with the up by a goal. We saw them with possession and 40 seconds on the clock. And what did they do? They ran the clock down, passing it.
I obviously haven't watched the game. I don't know if this was a matter of Firebirds, really stepping up or if it was Vixens not performing at their usual level. Which one was it? Was it a mix of both? I don't know.
To be fair, I think it was probably a mix of both. I wouldn't call that Vixen's best performance by any means. I think they also had a lot of errors. They were getting quite pressure on the shot. Firebirds actually had really good defensive pressure on them, and Firebirds' weakness was their attack end letting them down and not converting it. Curious to see where they go next week, because it is hard when you're someone in the top 4 versus someone on the bottom of the ladder. If you're only just scraping by a win going into finals, I don't know how that would sort of be a huge vote of confidence personally.
Yeah, like it feels like the four teams on the ladder under Fever at the moment are only in competition with each other. They are all quite, I would say, almost like an even playing field in regards to the inconsistency and the essentially our complete inability to predict how the games are going to go because we don't know what team is going to turn up on the day. With Fever, I would say it's fair to say, you know, that with every single game, they're going to put out a really solid performance. And let's take that to lead into the fourth and final game of this round, which was, of course, Fever versus Giants, the game, as always, we both attended. So we had a big out at the beginning of this game, and that was Jordan Kranzberg, and she was out due to illness, so not an injury, thankfully. So although we were disappointed to see this out, I don't think either of us were necessarily concerned because, like we've said, Jenna, time and time again, something that Fever have that we don't see really with many of the other teams, if any, is just the level of quality and experience on their bench. So every time they are forced to make a change, Fever have someone on the bench who can perform just as well. So there are no chinks in that armor. If anything, what we saw is the only area that they don't have depth in is that goal shooter position. And that is why we saw Fever struggle when they didn't have Janelle Fowler, Nemad in the lineup. But obviously having her back on court, we see changes across the rest of the lineup in that team time and time again. We see Zoe come on, Jordan come off. You know, we see the defenders, you know, rotate around those positions all the time, all day long. And we do not see any effect in how strong the team is across the board. And I think that that is what Dan Ryan has done absolutely to perfection.
I would definitely agree. I think now that bench rotation throughout the season is really paying off, and Zoe just fits in so seamlessly. Even with Katie Ann Dehaney, we didn't see very much court time of her. She was also unwell. She was coughing quite a bit on the sideline. But you'd think, oh no, Fever didn't miss a beat. You can't take one person off at this point and they fall apart. They are just as strong as each other, and that is a huge credit to that rotation and to their squad.
100%. You mentioned before as well, just when you think, you know, you can't get any better than being the GOAT in Janelle season, she's just brought more, even fitter, even faster, higher elevation, stronger takes, you know, like super shots. We've seen her do everything this season. We're kind of broken records in that sense, and that we must sound so biased, but it's just there's nothing very much to critique.
And I feel like as well, when we had like when Swifts were going through their long undefeated run top of the ladder, as the weeks progressed, you could actually see them getting more and more worked out, and you could see the cracks start to form. In Fever's case, I don't feel like we have seen there any underbellies exposed. They've just gone from strength to strength. And right now, I'm very curious to see who is going to put up a challenge to Fever. You know, we have Vixens and Fever next week, which is always a tight tussle. But Fever got a pretty decent win on them last time too. So, and especially in their current form and in Vixen's a bit inconsistent form right now, you know, I know who I'd be tipping.
We actually had the start of this game against Giants start out fairly competitively. Like the first half, the Giants were in this game. We had a record-breaking crowd in the Fever Stadium, and they put the numbers up, and it was 11,899. This stadium was fairly quiet during the first half of this game because the Giants were keeping pretty tight. This contest was on. And as we've seen Giants do before, they can start games really, really well. They can't always finish them well. Fever continued playing very, very consistently throughout this game. Now, I do actually think that if the Giants had been able to keep the score within a 4 to 5 goal margin, they could have won this on super shots. They have, you know, they have all of the tools in order to make that happen. But what I think is what cost them this game and cost them that strategy was when we saw Joe come off and Matisse come on. I think that this was a mistake to put Matisse against the Fever defenders. She was absolutely and completely out-muscled. We all know how accurate she is, but you need to have ball in hand to take those shots in the first place, and that is what we saw the Fever defenders really shut down very quickly on her. So that is when the momentum really shifted for me. And then they weren't able to recover even when Joe did come back on. Saw quite a collision between JLP and two Fever players who all went to contest the ball. So from what I remember, Joe Harton passed to JLP, who was essentially in the middle of two Fever defenders, and they all went in together to try and contest that pass. And as we normally see, JLP looked unharmed. And unfortunately, one of her opponents hit the ground, and in this case, it was Zoe Kranzberg. It was quite, shocking at the time. Like we saw her on the ground for some time. We saw JLP with her, trying to make sure if she was okay. And then, of course, the head collision concussion protocol took place, and we saw Zoe come off. It was at this point where Fever were playing with not their first choice lineup, so without Jordan, not their second choice lineup, so without Zoe, and they were still able to, I think Jess Ansis moved to centre, and again, like we mentioned, you wouldn't have noticed a thing. There was absolutely no loss in that momentum, particularly in the mid-court for Fever. It was like nothing had changed. And that, again, is just credit to how strong every single bench player is as well for the Fever team. We even saw Beckford come off and Liv Wilkinson come on. This is when I really expected the Giants to capitalise on these changes. And unfortunately, they just didn't.
Thought it was a very strong start from Fever, and those super shots definitely kept Giants in touch in the first half. When Dehaney came on as well in that second quarter, immediate impact. The Joe Harton missed this first shot right after Dehaney came on. So you could just tell from that pressure that Fever were building alone, and then to have someone of that like Dehaney on the court, it really just went to show how much someone's presence alone can really impact. We saw some really good battles this week. The Zoe and Jamie Lee Price clashes all throughout the game. They were going from the get-go. We saw Sligo and Alice Teague Neal. We saw Fran and Joe absolutely going at it. Joe getting some elbows up in there too. So we had some really, really juicy matchups over the court. But yeah, that hit that Zoe took was directly in front of me. And from my angle, I saw her from the back. So from my angle, when Jamie came through, it actually looked like Zoe had been hit in the head first. And then the sound that she made when she hit the ground, it like the shock and gasp from the whole crowd. And then she was down for a few minutes. And at first, I remember instantly thinking, when you're in the moment with the emotion, going, oh my God, head contact first. How is that not a send off? How is that not dangerous play? Like, oh my God. And the umpire's just sort of just standing there watching. I would have sort of liked him to have maybe gone over considering there's a player down. But when I got to watch it back with the emotions, settled a little bit, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, no, it was a tough one. Maybe someone should have pulled out of that. But I think it's hard when you've just got eyes for the ball and you're going. But I did want to say, I think it was good sportsmanship of Jamie to check on her and make sure she was okay. And, because, Jamie can be very hot-headed. And like we saw last week, there was a particular clash with Macy Gardner, which JLP was very heated in and sort of just gave her this look and walked off. But it was good to see even Jamie recognize, oh shit, okay, this was a bit of a hard hit. Let me check that she's okay. So it was good to see that. But even speaking on good sportsmanship, having Casey there and Fowler, they were having a good old chat and a laugh throughout the game. And that's just what you want to see, especially with some of these younger players. They come on and some of the attitudes that they have is just, not what it's about. So that was really nice to see them still, having fun with the game, because that's just what you want.
At the end of the day as well, these women are role models, whether they want to be or not. They are role models, and young girls are watching how they treat each other on the court, and that trickles down into grassroots and social and state, and it trickles down to everywhere. So if you are seeing your idols act a certain way, the likelihood that will affect your own behavior in regards to what you think the standard is very high. Well, that takes us straight into another headline that we wanted to chat about, and that is the speculation and rumors around the future of the Giants. So you and I have talked about this a lot as well, Jenna. There is a lot of speculation in regards to what this team is going to look like, not just next year, but the next year as well. So for the next 2 years, there's going to be massive changes. We know that JLP is contracted for another year. We know that Jo Harton is going to make her decision on whether or not she continues at the end of this season. Whether or not she has already vocalized her decision to her team, we don't know. It hasn't been made public, but we know it's coming. And then, of course, we have Casey Kopua, who has been flying back and forth from New Zealand to Australia for this opportunity to play with the Giants and the incredible impact that she's had to the team. I would say it's very likely that the Giants would beg her to sign on for another season. Whether or not that is something she wants, we are yet to see. It is obviously a huge commitment on her part, particularly because she does have a young family in another country. So having said that, for argument's sake, say Giants next year are facing a very young team with very little experience on the court. So no Jo, no Casey, and then very soon after, no JLP. Who are you possibly replacing those positions with? Where are you drawing that experience from? You have a long list of reserves players you could pull, of bench players on other teams that you could pull to be starting 7 players and give them that huge opportunity. But where are you pulling an experienced person, experienced player to fill those positions? And that is a huge concern for Giants' future.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think Giants sort of need to be in a bit of a rebuild mode, which is the same situation that Firebirds are in. It's time for a rebuild, you know. A lot of those big names, which is something I think Giants need. They need the big names. They need the crowd draws in. They need, you know. So the only real option would be to go after players that are coming off contracts. But that being said, players that have been at clubs for however many years are very loyal. So I think you'd pretty much have to look overseas, wouldn't you, if you're wanting someone with that more experience? Yeah, I feel like it is a bit slim pickings because
Here's a random thought, right, that I just had. What if, because we've seen all of the pushback from the New Zealand players in regards to the rules around their eligibility to play for the Silver Ferns if they play overseas. We've seen Grace make the decision for her future that she was going to take that risk and come to the SSN. Do you think we will see potentially more New Zealand players making that same choice based on how much we've seen Grace's game grow since she's been here?
I mean, we could possibly. I think as well there is so much uncertainty of whether or not the ANZ competition at the moment is actually going to be going ahead. Their seasons, they've only got 6 teams, I believe, in their season. So the season's actually been shortened. If I was wanting to play professional netball, I'd want to be in the best league in the world. I would be looking for those opportunities because with so much uncertainty, how long do you hold out before you make a call for yourself?
It opens the floodgates as well in regards to the competition and how many opportunities have been made available for pathway players for Australia. How many positions are we able to give to internationals? But at the end of the day, teams have got to try and win. Like that they're a business at the end of the day. Like from the club's perspective, like their goal is to try and win. And if they don't, then do we want to see the potential of a liquidation of a team like we saw with Collingwood? We don't want to see that again. We want teams to be competitive. We don't want any teams falling off, is what big picture wise, what is more beneficial for the sport? Keeping more teams alive or holding those options open for pathway players in Australia? Like, it's a hard choice. All right. Well, I think that is the end of our round 13 podcast episode. Thank you so much if you're still listening at this point. If you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a 5-star rating on Spotify. It really, really means the world to us. And we will see you next week after round 14.